The scent of whiskey and tobacco still clung to Faith Garrett's dress as she stumbled down the wooden steps of the Silver Dollar Saloon. Her carpetbag clutched against her chest like armor that had already failed. It was April of 1878, and Reno, Nevada had shown her exactly what it thought of women who tried to make an honest living in a dishonest world. 3 months she had lasted serving drinks and dodging hands. 3 months of saving every spare nickel until tonight when the owner's son had cornered her in the stockroom, and she had fought him off with a whiskey bottle. The look in his eyes when she fled told her she would never work in this town again. Not in any saloon, not in any respectable establishment either once the lies started spreading. The spring air carried a chill that made her pull her thin shawl tighter. Faith was 22 years old, alone in a territory that chewed up and spit out women like her daily. Her parents had died of fever 2 years back in Sacramento, leaving her with nothing but debts she had tried desperately to pay. She had come to Reno because it was growing, because the railroad had brought opportunity, or so the newspapers claimed. But opportunity, she had learned, had a different face for women without family or fortune. She walked without direction, her worn boots clicking against the boardwalk until the sounds of the Saloon district faded behind her. The streets grew quieter, residential, where decent folks lived in whitewashed houses with picket fences and flower boxes. Faith felt their invisible judgment even in the darkness. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. Crying was a luxury she could not afford, not when she needed to think, to plan, to figure out how she would eat tomorrow. "Miss, you all right there?" The voice startled her so badly she nearly dropped her bag. Faith spun around to find a tall figure leaning against a hitching post outside a modest stable. As he stepped into the moonlight, she could make out a man in his mid-20s, wearing dusty trail clothes and a wide-brimmed hat pushed back to reveal sun-darkened features and concerned gray eyes. "I'm fine," Faith said automatically, the lie bitter on her tongue. "Begging your pardon, but you don't look fine." He straightened up, and she noticed how he kept his hands visible, non-threatening. "You look like someone who just had the worst night of their life." Something about his gentle tone, the genuine concern rather than the leering interest she had grown accustomed to, cracked something inside her. "That obvious? I've seen that look in the mirror a time or two." He took a step closer, still respectful of the distance between them. "Name's Parker Anderson. I run a small ranch about 15 miles north of here. Came into town for supplies and my horse threw a shoe, so I'm stuck until the blacksmith opens in the morning." Faith studied him carefully. Parker Anderson had an honest face, weathered by sun and wind but open in a way that suggested he had not yet learned to hide himself from the world. His clothes were clean but worn, the boots of a working man, the hands calloused from labor rather than cards or bottles. "Faith Garrett," she heard herself say. "And you're right. Worst night of my life or close enough to it." Parker glanced back toward the Saloon district, understanding dawning in his expression. "You worked at one of the establishments back there, the Silver Dollar." "Until about 20 minutes ago." Faith forced herself to meet his eyes, daring him to judge her. "I served drinks. Nothing more, no matter what anyone might say. Tonight the owner's son decided he wanted something I was not willing to give, and I convinced him otherwise with a bottle of rye whiskey." To her surprise, Parker's expression hardened not toward her but with protective anger. "Good for you. Man's got no right to take what is not freely offered. I don't care whose son he is." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "Where are you planning to go now?" Faith laughed, a hollow sound that held no humor. "That's an excellent question. I have about $4 to my name, no references that anyone will believe, and by morning half this town will think I'm some kind of criminal or worse." Parker was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant as though working through a complicated problem. When he finally spoke, his words came slowly, carefully. "I'm going to make you an offer, and I want you to know there are no strings attached. You can say no, and I will tip my hat and wish you well, understand?" Faith's stomach tightened. She had heard offers before. They always came with strings, invisible threads that bound and strangled. "I'm listening. My ranch, it is not much. 200 acres of decent grazing land, a small herd of cattle, some horses. I built a house there 2 years ago when I thought I would be bringing home a bride, but she decided city life in San Francisco suited her better than being a rancher's wife." He cleared his throat. "Point is, the house has 2 bedrooms. You could have 1. There is work to be done, more than I can handle alone, honestly. Cooking, mending, helping with the garden I keep meaning to plant. I could pay you a fair wage, room and board plus $20 a month. You would have your own space, your own key to your room if that makes you feel safer." Faith stared at him, searching for the catch, the hidden price. "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" "Because I remember what it is like to need help and not know where to find it." Parker's voice carried the weight of old pain. "When my parents died of cholera 5 years back, I was 17 and everyone wanted to buy the ranch for nothing, take advantage of a grieving kid. One man helped me instead, taught me what I needed to know to make a go of it. I have been looking for a way to pay that kindness forward. You could hire anyone, someone with references, someone respectable. Respectable folks do not usually need the kind of help I am offering." Parker met her eyes steadily. "I'm offering a job and a safe place to land, Miss Garrett. What you make of it after that is up to you." The practical part of Faith's mind screamed caution. She did not know this man, did not know if his seeming kindness masked darker intentions. But the alternative was spending her last few dollars on a room she could afford for maybe 3 nights, then facing the streets or worse. At least on a ranch 15 miles from town, she would have room to run if she needed to. "If I say yes," Faith said slowly, "and if you try anything at all that I do not agree to, I will leave, even if it means walking 15 miles in the dark. That is completely fair." Parker removed his hat, holding it respectfully. "And I give you my word as a man who loved his mother and respected his father, I will not lay a hand on you except in greeting or if you are in danger. Your room will have a lock. You can keep it bolted every night if you want." Faith took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood at the edge of a cliff in the darkness, unable to see what lay below but knowing she could not stay where she was. "All right, Mr. Anderson, I'll take your offer, at least for a trial period. Parker, please, and thank you, Miss Garrett. I think this might work out well for both of us." He settled his hat back on his head. "I've got a room at the boarding house for tonight. We can head out to the ranch first thing in the morning once my horse is ready. Mrs. Chen, who runs the place, might have a room available if you need somewhere to stay tonight. I'd appreciate that." Faith felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders, though suspicion still lurked at the edges of her mind. Time would tell if Parker Anderson was truly the decent man he appeared to be. The boarding house was a tidy building run by a no-nonsense Chinese woman who asked few questions when Parker explained that Faith needed a room for the night and would be working at his ranch. Mrs. Chen quoted a price that Faith could afford, showed her to a small but clean room, and mentioned that breakfast was at 6 if she wanted it. Alone finally, Faith set down her carpetbag and sank onto the narrow bed. Her hands were shaking, she realized, the full weight of the evening finally settling on her. She had left the saloon in shame, her reputation in tatters, her future uncertain. And now, she was planning to ride out to an isolated ranch with a stranger based on nothing but a gut feeling and desperation. but something in Parker Anderson's eyes had seemed genuine. The way he spoke of his mother, the respect he showed in keeping his distance, the offer of a locked door. These were not the actions of a man planning harm, or perhaps Faith was simply too tired, too desperate to see the truth. She lay back on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. For tonight, she had a roof over her head and a door that locked. It was more than she had expected when she fled down those saloon steps. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of reaching hands and whiskey bottles, of gray eyes and promises that seemed too good to be true. Morning arrived with the smell of frying bacon and fresh bread wafting up from the dining room. Faith washed her face in the basin, changed into her other dress which was hardly cleaner than the first, and braided her long dark hair into a practical plait. In the mirror, she saw a woman who looked older than 22, with shadows under her hazel eyes and a wariness that had not been there 2 years ago. Parker was already in the dining room, cleaned up and eating breakfast with the efficiency of a man who had places to be. He stood when Faith entered, the gesture so automatic and courteous it spoke of good upbringing. "Morning, Miss Garrett. Did you sleep all right?" "Well enough," Faith said, taking the seat across from him. "And you, like a stone. I always do when I know there is work waiting for me." He poured her coffee from the pot on the table. "Blacksmith will have my horse ready within the hour. I thought we could pick up a few supplies before we head out if there is anything you need." Faith thought of her meager belongings. "I travel light." "Fair enough. The ranch has basics, but if there is anything particular you want for your room or for cooking, speak up. I'm not much for fancy fixings, but I believe in having what you need to do a job right." Mrs. Chen brought out plates of eggs, bacon, and thick slices of bread with butter and jam. Faith had not realized how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. She ate with forced restraint, aware of Parker watching her with a thoughtfulness that made her self-conscious. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. Faith tensed. "You can ask. You know how to ride." Of all the questions she had been bracing for, that was not one of them. "Some. My father had a horse when I was young. It has been a while, though." "That is fine. I've got a gentle mare that will suit you. It is a bit of a ride to the ranch, and I figured you would rather not sit behind me on my horse if you do not have to." The consideration in that simple statement struck Faith deeply. He understood without being told that she would want her own space, her own control. "Thank you. That's thoughtful." Parker shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "Just practical. You will need to be able to get around the property, and I cannot always be playing escort." They finished breakfast in companionable silence. Faith found herself studying Parker when she thought he was not looking. He had strong features, not handsome in the delicate way some men were, but appealing in a rugged, weathered fashion. His hands were broad and capable, his movements economical and sure. He seemed comfortable in his skin in a way Faith envied. The blacksmith had Parker's horse ready as promised, a sturdy bay gelding with intelligent eyes. Parker also arranged for Faith to use the gentle gray mare he had mentioned, paying the blacksmith to send over the rental fee later. He seemed known and respected in town, Faith noticed. Men greeted him by name, and the shopkeeper where they stopped for a few supplies gave them fair prices without trying to cheat. "You have a good reputation here," Faith observed as they loaded supplies onto the horses. Parker looked surprised. "I do my best to deal fair." "That is all most folks ask." He hesitated. "I know you have reason to be cautious, Miss Garrett. I know you do not know me from Adam and you are taking a big risk. I just want you to know that I understand that, and I will try my best to prove myself worthy of the chance you are giving me." "I thought I was the one who needed to prove myself," Faith said quietly. "We all do, every day." Parker swung up into his saddle with practiced ease. "Ready to see your new home?" Faith mounted the gray mare, settling into the saddle and reacquainting herself with the feel of a horse beneath her. "Ready as I'll ever be." They rode north out of Reno, following a well-worn trail that climbed gradually into rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and juniper. The morning sun warmed Faith's back, and despite everything, she felt something ease in her chest as the town fell away behind them. Out here, the air smelled clean, pine sharp and earth sweet. The only sounds were the horses' hooves, the creak of leather, and the occasional call of a hawk circling overhead. Parker did not push for conversation, seeming content to let Faith absorb the landscape. After an hour, he pointed to a stand of cottonwoods following what must be a creek. "That is the southern boundary of the ranch. Water rights were the main reason I was able to afford the property. The creek runs year-round, fed by snowmelt from the Sierras." As they rode closer, Faith could see the land more clearly. The hills were covered in wild grasses just beginning to green up with spring growth. Cattle grazed in clusters, red-brown shapes against the gold and green landscape. In the distance, mountains rose purple and snow capped against the blue sky. "It is beautiful," Faith said and meant it. Parker's face brightened with unmistakable pride. "I think so. It is not easy land, but it is good land. Honest land, if that makes sense." It did make sense. After the smoke-filled darkness of the saloon, the pretense and danger, this open country felt like truth written in grass and stone. Another half-hour brought them to the ranch house itself, and Faith felt her breath catch. It was not large, but it was solid and well-built, constructed of timber and stone with a wide porch facing east to catch the morning sun. Smoke curled from the chimney, and Faith saw gardens plots laid out but not yet planted, a barn and several outbuildings in good repair, corrals holding horses. "You built this yourself?" Faith asked as they dismounted. "Most of it. Had help with the heavy timber work, but yeah, most of it is my own hands." Parker led the horses toward the barn. "Let me show you inside once we get these two settled." The barn was as well organized as everything else, with stalls for a dozen horses and a hay loft suite with dried grass. Parker showed Faith how he liked the tack arranged, where the feed was stored, demonstrating rather than ordering. It was clear he took pride in his work, in the life he had built here. The house interior surprised Faith with its comfort. The main room held a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, a sofa that looked handmade but inviting. The kitchen area was well equipped with a cast iron stove, good pots and pans, shelves stocked with basic supplies. Everything was clean but lived in, the home of a working man who took care of what was his. "Your room is through here," Parker said, leading her to a door off the main room. "Mine is on the other side of the house past the kitchen. We each have our own space." Faith's room was simple but comfortable, with a real bed covered in a wedding ring quilt, a dresser with a mirror, a washstand, and a window looking out toward the mountains. Best of all, the door had a sturdy lock with a key sitting on the dresser. "I'll leave you to settle in," Parker said from the doorway. "Take your time. When you are ready, come on out and we can talk about what needs doing and work out a routine that suits us both." Alone in the room, Faith sat on the bed and looked around at what was, for now at least, hers. A space with a lock, a window with a view, a chance to start over. She thought of how she had fled the saloon last night, certain her life was over, that she had nowhere left to go. And now here she was, in a house on a ranch in the hills, with a man who seemed to genuinely want to help her. It felt too good to be true. Faith's experience taught her that things which seemed too good to be true usually were. But she was here now, and she would make the most of it while it lasted. She would work hard, save her wages, and be ready to leave if Parker Anderson turned out to be anything other than what he seemed. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her spare dress and shawl in the wardrobe, arranging her brush and the few pins she owned on the dresser. It took less than 5 minutes to settle everything she owned in the world. Looking at how empty the room still seemed, Faith felt a complicated mix of shame and determination. She had so little, but she was not defeated. Not yet. When she emerged from the room, she found Parker stoking the fire in the main fireplace despite the relatively warm day. He looked up when she entered, his expression cautiously hopeful. "All settled?" "Yes, thank you." Faith clasped her hands in front of her, suddenly uncertain. "What would you like me to start with?" Parker straightened up, brushing his hands on his trousers. "Well, I figure today we just get to know the routine. I can show you around the property, introduce you to the livestock, show you where everything is. Then maybe we can plan out what makes sense for dividing up the work." He paused. "I want to be clear, Miss Garrett. I am not looking for a servant. I am looking for a partner in keeping this place running. That means your input matters. If you have ideas about how to do things better, I want to hear them. Most men do not feel that way. I am not most men." Parker said it simply, without arrogance. "My mother ran our household and had opinions on the ranch work too. My father listened because she was usually right. I was raised to believe that smart is smart, regardless of whether you wear trousers or a dress." Faith felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. "All right then. Show me around and we will figure out how to make this work." They spent the rest of the day exploring the ranch. Parker showed her the cattle, explaining his plans for the herd and the challenges of ranching in Nevada's climate. He introduced her to the horses, each one by name and personality. He walked her through the garden plots, admitting sheepishly that he had no talent for growing vegetables, but knew the soil was good if someone who knew what they were doing worked it. "My mother had a garden," Faith found herself saying. "She grew tomatoes, beans, squash, herbs. I helped her from the time I could walk." Parker's face lit up. "Would you be willing to take that on then? I can help with the heavy digging and hauling, but the planning and planting, that could be your domain." The idea of having something that was hers, something she controlled, appealed deeply. "I'd like that." As the sun began to sink toward the western hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Parker showed Faith the creek that ran through the property. It was wider than she had expected, clear water running over smooth stones, lined with cottonwoods and willows just beginning to leaf out. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Parker admitted. "When work gets heavy or I need to think, I come down here. Something about running water that settles the mind." Faith understood completely. She knelt by the water's edge, trailing her fingers through the cold current. "It's peaceful. You are welcome here anytime, I mean that." Parker's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "I know I keep saying it, but I want you to feel like this is your home too, not just a place you work." Faith looked up at him, at this man who had offered his name and his ranch to a stranger in distress. In the golden light, with his hat pushed back and his expression open and honest, Parker Anderson looked like something out of a storybook. The kind of hero Faith had stopped believing in somewhere between her parents' death and her first week at the saloon. "Why did you really offer to help me?" she asked. "The truth." Parker was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the water. "Because I know what shame feels like," he said finally. "When my fiancée left, she made sure everyone knew it was because I was not good enough, not educated enough, not refined enough, not ambitious enough. She told her friends I was boring, simple, just a rancher who would never amount to anything more. For a while I believed her. I was ashamed of who I was, of the life I wanted." He looked at Faith then, his gray eyes serious. "When I saw you last night, You had that same look I saw in my mirror after she left. Like the world had judged you and found you wanting. I guess I wanted to offer you what I wished someone had offered me back then. A chance to start over without the weight of someone else's judgment. Faith felt tears prick her eyes. She was a fool to leave you. Parker smiled, but it was tinged with old hurt. Maybe. Or maybe she knew herself well enough to know this life was not for her. Either way, it taught me something about what I want. I want someone who sees value in this. He gestured at the ranch around them. Someone who understands that there is honor in hard work and building something with your own hands. Someone who does not need grand gestures and city life to be happy. That sounds like a reasonable thing to want. Is it something you think you could want? Eventually, I mean. Not now, but someday. Parker's cheeks colored slightly. I am not saying this right. I am not asking anything of you, Miss Garrett. I just want to know if you think you could be happy here if things work out. Faith considered the question seriously. 24 hours ago, she had been serving drinks to men who saw her as barely human, fending off unwanted advances, breathing smoke and desperation. Now she was sitting by a clear running creek in the spring evening, talking with a man who treated her with respect, looking out at land that stretched wild and beautiful in every direction. I think I could be, she said honestly. I think maybe I already am a little. Parker's smile was like sunrise, bright and warming. Good. That is real good, Miss Garrett. Faith, she said impulsively. If I am going to call you Parker, you should call me Faith. Faith, he repeated, and the way he said her name, careful and respectful, made it sound like something precious. It suits you. They walked back to the house as the stars began to emerge, talking more easily now about small things. Parker's plans for expanding the herd, Faith's memories of her mother's cooking, the weather patterns of the region, the best way to keep a garden from being raided by rabbits and deer. Inside, Parker built up the fire while Faith explored the kitchen more thoroughly, taking inventory of what was available. She found flour, cornmeal, bacon, beans, dried apples, coffee, sugar, and various other staples, enough to make a decent meal. Let me cook tonight, Faith offered. You have been working all day and I'd like to start earning my keep. You do not have to, Parker began, but Faith cut him off. I want to, please. He nodded, settling into one of the chairs by the fire. I won't argue with that. I am a decent enough cook to keep from starving, but I would not call it enjoyable eating. Faith smiled and set to work. She made corn cakes and fried bacon, stewed dried apples with cinnamon and sugar, and brewed strong coffee. It was simple food, but she put care into it, years of helping her mother in the kitchen guiding her hands. When she set the plates on the table, Parker looked at the meal with genuine appreciation. This looks wonderful, Faith, thank you. They ate together at the table, and Faith realized this was the first meal she had shared with a man that did not involve serving him or dodging crude comments. Parker ate with appreciation but not greed, complimented her cooking honestly, and asked about her day as though her experiences and thoughts mattered. After dinner, Faith washed the dishes while Parker dried and put them away, the two of them developing an easy rhythm. When the kitchen was clean, Parker banked the fire and wished Faith a good night, disappearing into his own room without lingering or making her feel pressured. In her room with the door locked, Faith changed into her nightgown and sat on the bed, processing everything that had happened. In less than a day, her entire life had transformed. She had gone from desperate and shamed to employed and housed, from invisible to seen, from judged to respected. It was too soon to trust it completely. Too soon to believe that Parker's kindness did not hide some darker expectation. But for tonight, Faith let herself feel the simple relief of safety. A roof, a bed, a locked door and a man on the other side of it who seemed genuinely good. She fell asleep to the sound of wind in the pines and woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee brewing. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Faith woke without dread. The days that followed established a routine that worked for both of them. Parker woke early to tend the livestock and handle the heavier ranch work. Faith made breakfast, then spent her mornings working in the garden, planning and planting according to her mother's teachings. Afternoons she used for household tasks, mending, cleaning, and preparing dinner. Evenings they spent together, talking by the fire or on the porch as the weather grew warmer, discussing the ranch, their pasts, their hopes for the future. Parker was easy to work with, Faith discovered. He never demanded or ordered, instead asking and discussing. When Faith suggested improvements to the house or different ways of organizing work, he listened and more often than not implemented her ideas. He was generous with praise, quick to notice when she had done something well, and patient when she made mistakes as she learned the rhythms of ranch life. For her part, Faith found herself working harder than she ever had at the saloon, but the work felt different. It was purposeful, building towards something rather than just surviving. She took pride in watching the garden flourish under her care, in keeping the house clean and comfortable, in preparing meals that brought genuine pleasure to Parker's face. 3 weeks into her time at the ranch, Faith realized she had stopped checking that her carpetbag was packed and ready for a quick escape. 4 weeks in, she found herself singing while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her that she had forgotten she knew. 5 weeks in, she looked up from weeding the garden to see Parker working with one of the horses in the corral, his movements patient and sure, and felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. She was falling for him. Despite her best efforts to remain detached and practical, Faith was developing feelings for Parker Anderson that went beyond gratitude or friendship. It terrified her. One evening in late May, after a dinner of fresh trout Parker had caught in the creek and vegetables from the garden that were finally ready to harvest, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The air smelled of sage and pine, and somewhere a nighthawk called. "Can I ask you something personal?" Parker said, breaking the comfortable silence. Faith tensed slightly. "You can ask. Do you think you will ever want to go back to town, to Reno or maybe somewhere bigger?" "Why do you ask?" Parker was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against the porch railing. "Because I have been thinking. You have been here almost 6 weeks now and you have made this place better in every way. The house feels like a home. The garden is thriving. Everything runs smoother. But I worry that maybe you will get lonely or bored out here. That you will want more than what ranch life offers." Faith heard the unspoken question beneath his words. He was asking if she would leave like his fiancé had, if the isolation and hard work would eventually send her seeking an easier life. "I grew up in a city," Faith said slowly, thinking through her answer. "Sacramento first, then Sacramento again after my parents died. I thought cities were where opportunities were, where life happened. But you know what I found in cities? Noise and crowds and people who looked through you like you did not exist unless you had something they wanted. I found judgment and shame and constant scrambling just to survive." She looked out at the darkening landscape, at the vast sweep of hills and sky. "Out here, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. The work is hard, but it is honest. At the end of the day, I can see what I have accomplished. And the quiet, the space, it does not feel lonely to me. It feels peaceful." "So you are happy here?" Parker's voice was carefully neutral, but Faith heard the hope underlying it. "I am happier than I have been in a very long time." Faith turned to look at him directly. "Are you worried I will leave?" "Maybe a little." Parker met her eyes. I've gotten used to having you here, Faith. More than used to it. I look forward to mornings because I know you will be in the kitchen with coffee ready, and that smile you have before you have remembered to guard it. I look forward to dinner because I know we will talk and you will have some observation about the ranch or the weather or something you read that makes me see things differently. I look forward to these evenings most of all, just sitting with you, being in your company. Faith's heart was racing. Parker, let me finish, please. He took a deep breath. I know when I offered you this job, I said there were no strings attached. I meant that and I still mean it. But I also have to be honest with you about what I am feeling because it is not fair to either of us if I am not. He stood up, pacing the length of the porch before turning back to her. I have feelings for you, Faith. Real, deep feelings that go way beyond friendship or working partnership. You are smart and capable and kind, and you see the value in this life I am trying to build. When I think about the future now, I cannot imagine it without you in it. Faith stood, her legs unsteady. I have feelings for you too, she said quietly. I have been trying not to, trying to stay practical and protect myself, but I do. Parker closed the distance between them in 2 strides, stopping just short of touching her. I do not want to pressure you or make you feel obligated because I am your employer. If you need me to step back, I will. But if there is a chance, any chance at all, that you might feel the same way I do, I would very much like to court you properly. Court me. Faith could not help the small laugh that escaped. Parker, we live in the same house. We eat every meal together. We spend nearly every waking hour in each other's company. I think we are a bit beyond traditional courting. Maybe so. Parker's lips quirked in a half-smile. But I want to do this right. I want to give you time to be sure, to know your own heart without feeling rushed or pressured. I want to earn the right to your affections, not just benefit from proximity and gratitude. Faith reached out then, taking his hand in hers. His palm was calloused and warm, his fingers closing gently around hers. You have already earned it, she said softly. You earned it when you offered me help without expecting anything in return. You earned it every day since then by treating me like a person who matters, whose thoughts and feelings are important. You earned it by being exactly who you seemed to be that first night, by being genuine and kind and honorable. Parker raised their joined hands, pressing his lips to her knuckles in a gesture so tender it made Faith's eyes sting with tears. I want to marry you, he said simply. Not right away if you are not ready, but someday. I want you to be my wife, my true partner. I want to build this ranch into something we can be proud of together, raise a family here if you are willing, grow old watching sunsets from this porch. Yes, Faith said, the word escaping before she could think better of it, but as soon as she said it, she knew it was right. Yes, Parker, I will marry you. His smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. You mean it, you are sure, I am sure. Faith stepped closer, bringing them nearly chest to chest. I have spent the last 6 weeks trying to convince myself not to fall in love with you, and I failed completely. I love the way you treat the animals with gentleness, the way you never talk down to me, the way you build things with your own hands and take pride in honest work. I love that you see value in what we have here, that you do not need grand gestures or wealth to be content. I love you, Parker Anderson, and I would be honored to be your wife. Parker cupped her face in his hands, his touch reverent. May I kiss you, please? Faith whispered. The kiss was soft and sweet, unhurried and full of promise. Faith felt tears slip down her cheeks, overwhelmed by the tenderness of it, by the knowledge that she was choosing this, that Parker was choosing her, that together they were creating something true and good. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Parker rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this properly, he said. I want to go into town, Get a ring, announce our engagement, get married in a church with witnesses if you want that. Faith thought about Reno, about the people who had judged her, the saloon where she had worked, the shame that had followed her. I do not need a big wedding, but I would like it to be legal and official. I want to stand up in front of people and declare that I am choosing you, choosing this life. Then that is what we will do. Parker kissed her again, brief and joyful. How soon? What feels right to you? We have only known each other 6 weeks, Faith said practically. People will talk. Let them talk. I have known you long enough to know my own heart. Parker took both her hands in his. But I will wait as long as you need to be comfortable. Faith considered. Part of her wanted to wait, to prove to herself and the world that this was not a rash decision born of desperation. But a larger part of her knew that waiting would not change what she felt, would not make her more certain than she already was. A month, she decided. That will give us time to plan properly, to make the trip to town and arrange things. By then, we will have known each other nearly 3 months. That seems reasonable. A month, Parker agreed. And in the meantime, I will court you properly. Even if we live under the same roof, I can still bring you flowers from the meadow, take you on picnics by the creek, tell you daily how fortunate I am that you walked into my life. Faith laughed, feeling lighter than air. You are a romantic, Parker Anderson. Only for you, he said seriously. Only for you. The next weeks were a blur of preparation and joy. Parker rode into Reno and returned with a simple gold ring that fit Faith's finger perfectly. They announced their intention to marry at the general store, the land office, and the church, setting a date for the last Saturday in June. Faith worried about facing the town again, about encountering people who might remember her from the saloon, but Parker's presence beside her, proud and protective, made all the difference. If anyone thought poorly of her past, they kept it to themselves, at least in Parker's hearing. The ranch owner had a reputation for fairness and hard work, and people seemed willing to accept his choice of bride. The minister, Reverend Thompson, agreed to perform the ceremony and suggested only that they attend Sunday services a few times before the wedding so the congregation could meet Faith properly. Parker and Faith made the long ride to town 3 Sundays in a row, sitting in the small church while curious eyes examined them. Faith held her head high, Parker's hand warm and steady in hers. She had nothing to be ashamed of. She had worked to survive, had protected herself, and had chosen to build a new life. Anyone who judged her for that was not worth her concern. The community, for the most part, seemed willing to welcome her. Ranch wives invited her to quilting circles and shared advice about managing a household in the territory. Shopkeepers remembered her name. Children smiled shyly when she passed. It was not full acceptance, perhaps, but it was a start. At the ranch, Faith and Parker navigated their engagement with a mixture of propriety and growing intimacy. They still maintained separate bedrooms, but now their evenings on the porch included stolen kisses and whispered plans for the future. Parker brought her wildflowers daily, bouquets of lupine and Indian paintbrush that brightened the house. They took long walks through the property, hands intertwined, discussing where they might expand the house someday, how many children they hoped for, what their life together might look like in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. Faith discovered new depths to Parker's character. He had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed, a surprisingly lovely singing voice he was shy about using, a deep knowledge of the land and animals that spoke of years of careful observation. He was patient and thoughtful, slow to anger but fierce in protecting what he loved. For his part, Parker seemed endlessly fascinated by Faith. He loved hearing her stories about her childhood, her parents, her mother's wisdom about gardening and homemaking. He encouraged her to share her opinions about the ranch operations and implemented her suggestions with gratitude. He made her feel valued in a way she had never experienced. The garden flourished under Faith's care, yielding lettuce and radishes, with tomatoes and beans promising a strong harvest. She preserved what they could not eat fresh, filling the pantry with jars of pickles and relishes. Parker built her proper shelving and praised her industry. The wedding day arrived with perfect June weather, warm but not hot, with a breeze carrying the scent of wild roses. Faith wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Parker had insisted on buying, a simple design in pale blue that brought out her eyes. She pinned her hair up with the few good pins she owned and carried a bouquet of wildflowers Parker had picked that morning. Parker wore his best clothes, looking nervous and proud as he waited at the altar of the small church. When Faith walked down the aisle on the arm of Mr. Chen, the boarding house owner's husband who had kindly agreed to stand in for her absent father, Parker's face lit with such joy that Faith felt tears prick her eyes. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged vows in strong, clear voices, promising to love and honor each other, to work together in building their life, to stand beside each other in good times and hard. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Parker kissed Faith with tender reverence, and she knew she had made the right choice. A small reception followed at the church hall, with cake and punch provided by the church ladies. Faith found herself welcomed by women who had been reserved before, as though marriage had conferred upon her a respectability she had lacked. It rankled slightly, but she understood the way society worked. As Parker's wife, she had a place and a name that commanded respect. They rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon, Faith's hand resting on Parker's thigh as they shared his horse, the gray mare following behind. The landscape had never seemed more beautiful, the hills golden in the slanting light, the sky endless and blue. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Anderson?" Parker asked as they neared the ranch. Faith considered. "Right," she said finally. "It feels absolutely right." That night, their wedding night, they came together with tenderness and care. Parker was patient and gentle, attentive to Faith's responses, making sure she felt safe and cherished. The intimacy they shared felt like the natural culmination of everything they had been building together, a physical expression of the emotional connection they had forged. Afterward, lying in Parker's bed with his arm around her and her head on his chest, Faith felt a peace she had never known. She had left the saloon with nothing but shame, certain her life was over. And now she was here, married to a good man, building a life she could be proud of. "What are you thinking?" Parker asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I am grateful," Faith said honestly. "Grateful for everything that led me to you, even the painful parts. They brought me here." Parker kissed the top of her head. "I am the grateful one. I did not know what I was missing until you filled the empty spaces I had gotten used to carrying around." They fell asleep tangled together, and when Faith woke in the morning to find Parker still beside her, his sleeping face relaxed and peaceful, she felt her heart swell with love so intense it was almost painful. The summer passed in a haze of work and happiness. Faith and Parker fell into new rhythms as husband and wife, sharing a bed and a life completely now. The ranch prospered under their combined care. The cattle herd grew, the garden produced abundantly, and the house became truly a home. In August, Faith realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week to be sure, then told Parker one evening as they sat by the creek, their special place. "I think I am with child," she said simply. Parker's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy, picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down with exaggerated care, worried he had been too rough. "Are you happy?" Faith asked, laughing at his antics. "Happy does not begin to cover it." Parker's hands trembled as he cupped her face. "We are going to be parents, Faith. We are going to have a family." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through fall and into winter. Faith felt well overall, just tired and occasionally queasy in the early months. Parker treated her like she was made of glass, trying to take over all her chores until Faith firmly told him she was pregnant, not ill, and perfectly capable of continuing her normal work with a few sensible modifications. They spent the long winter evenings planning for the baby, discussing names and preparing the small room off their bedroom as a nursery. Parker built a cradle with his own hands, working carefully to make it perfect. Faith sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full of anticipation. In March of 1879, almost exactly a year after Faith had fled the saloon in shame, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy in their bedroom with Parker holding her hand and a midwife from town, providing skilled assistance. The labor was long and difficult, but when Faith finally held her son in her arms, every moment of pain was forgotten. They named him Peter, after Parker's father. He had Faith's dark hair and eyes that seemed to shift between his mother's hazel and his father's gray. Parker wept when he first held his son, overcome with emotion at the tiny life they had created together. "Thank you," he whispered to Faith as she rested, exhausted but triumphant. "Thank you for him, for everything, for being exactly who you are." Faith smiled tiredly. "We made him together. He is as much you as me." Being parents transformed them in ways both expected and surprising. The easy rhythms they had established were disrupted by Peter's needs, but neither Faith nor Parker minded. They took turns walking him when he was fussy, marveled at every new expression and tiny change, and felt their love for each other deepen as they watched their son grow. The ranch continued to prosper. Parker expanded the herd and bought more land from a neighbor looking to retire. Faith's garden became known in the area for its productivity, and she began trading surplus vegetables for things they needed. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable and building security year by year. When Peter was 2, Faith became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy felt easier, more familiar. In January of 1882, she gave birth to a daughter they named Clara, after Faith's mother. Clara was smaller than Peter had been but healthy and loud, making her presence known from the moment she entered the world. Parker proved to be a devoted father to both children. He taught Peter to ride almost before the boy could walk, took him out to check on the cattle, showed him how to care for the horses. With Clara, he was gentle and playful, happy to sit on the floor playing with her toys or singing her silly songs. Faith watched her husband with their children and fell in love with him all over again. This was the life they had built together from the ashes of her shame and his heartbreak. Every hard day on the ranch, every challenge they faced and overcame together, had been worth it. The years passed with the rhythm of seasons and the chaos of raising children. Peter grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Clara was wild and joyful, fearless in a way that gave Faith heart palpitations but made Parker laugh with pride. When Peter was 7 and Clara 5, Faith discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, perhaps because she was older now, 31, and busier than ever with the ranch and the older children. But in September of 1886, she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Matthew and Grace. The twins were a handful from the start, so alike in appearance with their father's gray eyes and their mother's dark hair that strangers had trouble telling them apart, but opposite in temperament. Matthew was quiet and observant, content to watch the world. Grace was active and demanding, wanting to be involved in everything from the moment she could crawl. With 4 children, the house that had seemed spacious when Faith first arrived was now bursting at the seams. Parker spent the winter of 1887 expanding it, adding 2 more bedrooms and making the kitchen larger. Faith appreciated the extra space, but mostly she appreciated what it represented: their family growing, their life together flourishing. On their 10th wedding anniversary in June of 1888, Parker surprised Faith with a trip to Reno, just the 2 of them, leaving the children with a trusted neighbor. They stayed at the boarding house where Faith had spent that first frightened night, but everything was different now. They walked the streets of Reno together, Parker proud and Faith confident in a way she never could have imagined 10 years earlier. They passed the Silver Dollar Saloon, and Faith paused, looking at the building that had been the site of her greatest shame. "You ever regret it?" Parker asked quietly. That night, what happened? Faith thought about it seriously. "I regret that the world is set up in a way that forces women into impossible situations," she said slowly. "I regret the injustice of it, the way women are judged so harshly for simply trying to survive. But do I regret that specific night, the events that led me out of that saloon and into your path?" She turned to face her husband. "Not for a second. That night gave me everything I have now. It gave me you, our children, our life. How could I regret that?" Parker pulled her close, kissing her there on the street without caring who saw. "I love you, Faith Anderson, more every day, which I did not think was possible." They celebrated their anniversary with dinner at Reno's best restaurant, spending money they could afford now without worry. Over steak and wine, they talked about their plans for the ranch, about the children's futures, about growing old together. "When we have grandchildren," Parker mused, "and they ask how we met, what will we tell them?" Faith considered. "The truth. That I was at the lowest point in my life, and their grandfather offered me kindness when I needed it most. That love can grow from the smallest seeds of decency and respect. That second chances are real if you are brave enough to take them." "That sounds about right." Parker reached across the table to take her hand. "I want them to know that their grandmother is the strongest person I have ever known, that she survived things that would have broken lesser people and came out of it with her kindness intact." Faith felt tears prick her eyes. Even after 10 years, Parker could still surprise her with the depth of his love and respect. "I want them to know their grandfather saw value in a stranger who had nothing, and that generosity changed both our lives." They returned to the ranch the next day, eager to see their children, but also carrying with them the renewed connection of their time alone. The children mobbed them at the door, all talking at once about everything that had happened in the 2 days they had been gone. Faith gathered them close, breathing in the scent of sun and dust and childhood, feeling her heart full to bursting. Life continued its steady march forward. Peter grew into a young man who was quieter than his father, but just as devoted to the ranch. At 15, he was already handling many of the daily operations, giving Parker time to focus on expanding their holdings. Clara, at 13, showed no interest in traditional feminine pursuits, preferring to ride fence lines with her father and brother rather than help with household tasks. Faith supported her daughter's independence even as some of the ranch wives clucked their tongues. The twins, Matthew and Grace, were 8 and a delightful chaos of energy. Matthew had discovered a love of books and spent hours reading everything he could find, already talking about maybe becoming a teacher someday. Grace wanted to be a veterinarian, a profession she had learned about from a traveling doctor who tended to livestock. In the spring of 1893, 15 years after that night when Faith had stumbled out of the Silver Dollar Saloon, She and Parker sat on their porch watching the sunset as they had done countless times before. Peter was out checking the north pasture. Clara was in the barn with a mare who was about to foal, and the twins were supposed to be doing homework, but were actually playing some elaborate game involving the barn cats. You ever think about how different our lives could have been? Faith asked, her head resting on Parker's shoulder. Sometimes, Parker admitted. I think about what would have happened if I had not gone into Reno that night, or if I had stayed at the boarding house instead of going out to check on my horse. We might never have met. The thought terrifies me, Faith said honestly. All the happiness we have had, the children, this life we built, it all hinged on one moment, one decision to offer help to a stranger. Parker turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious. You know what I think? I think we were always meant to find each other. Maybe not that exact night, maybe not that exact way, but somehow, somewhere, our paths would have crossed. Because what we have, this connection, it is too strong to have been pure chance. Faith smiled, reaching up to touch his face. The years had added lines around his eyes and threads of silver to his dark hair, but to her, he was just as handsome as the young man who had offered her hope when she had none. I love you, she said simply. For everything you have given me, for everything we have built together, but mostly just for being you. I love you too, Parker replied. My Faith, my wife, my partner, the mother of my children, the love of my life. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and purple. From the barn came Clara's excited shout that the foal was coming, and they both stood to go help, but Parker caught Faith's hand, stopping her for just a moment. Thank you, he said quietly, for taking a chance on a stranger with nothing to offer but a clean start and his name. You could have said no that night. You could have walked away, but you trusted me, and that trust has been the greatest gift of my life. Faith pulled him close, kissing him with all the love and gratitude that filled her heart. You offered me everything when I had nothing. You saw worth in me when I could not see it in myself. How could I not take that chance? They walked hand in hand toward the barn, toward their daughter who needed help, toward the continuing story of their life together. Behind them, the house they had built stood solid and welcoming, lights beginning to glow in the windows as the twins lit lamps. Around them, the ranch spread in every direction, the land they had worked and tended and loved into prosperity. Faith Garrett Anderson had left a saloon in shame, carrying nothing but a carpetbag and shattered dreams. Parker Anderson had offered her a clean start and his name, asking nothing in return, but the chance to prove that kindness still existed in a harsh world. Together, they had built a life that neither could have imagined that night 15 years ago. A life filled with love and children, hard work and honest rewards, challenges overcome and dreams realized. They had proven that second chances were real, that love could grow from the smallest acts of compassion, that two wounded souls could heal each other and create something beautiful in the process. As Faith helped Clara with the birthing mare, as Parker praised their daughter's skill and steadiness, as the twins came running to see the new foal, as Peter returned from his rounds with a report on the cattle, Faith felt a deep and abiding gratitude for every twist and turn that had brought her to this moment. She had been broken and remade. She had been shamed and redeemed. She had been lost and found. And through it all, Parker had been there, offering not judgment but acceptance, not demands but partnership, not control but respect. Their love story had started in darkness and desperation, but it had blossomed into light and joy. It was a story they would tell their grandchildren someday, a testament to the power of compassion and the possibility of transformation. The years continued to unfold with both predictable rhythms and unexpected surprises. Peter, at 20, fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a bright young woman named Sarah, who won Faith's heart immediately with her intelligence and kindness. Their wedding in 1898 was a grand affair that brought together the entire community, and Faith wept happy tears watching her son pledge his life to a woman who clearly adored him. Clara, true to her independent spirit, announced at 18 that she wanted to attend veterinary school back east. It was unconventional, nearly scandalous, for a woman to pursue such education, but Parker and Faith supported her completely, using money they had carefully saved to send her to Cornell University. The ranch wives whispered, but Clara thrived, writing long letters home about her studies and her determination to return to Nevada to practice. Matthew did become a teacher, taking a position at the school in Reno, where he taught mathematics and literature with a passion that inspired his students. Grace, not to be outdone by her twin, followed Clara's path and also pursued veterinary medicine, the two sisters supporting each other across the miles. As Faith and Parker entered their 50s, they found themselves with an emptier house but fuller hearts. Peter and Sarah built a home on the northern portion of the ranch, and soon Faith was a grandmother to a lively grandson named James. The joy of holding her grandchild, seeing Parker's gentleness with the baby, brought tears to her eyes. "We did it," she whispered to Parker one evening as they watched Peter play with James. "We built something that will last beyond us." Parker pulled her close. "We did it together. Everything good in my life comes back to you, Faith." In 1905, when Faith was 53 and Parker 56, they celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary with all 4 children home for the occasion. Clara had returned from school and established a veterinary practice in Reno, becoming one of the first women veterinarians in Nevada. Grace was still in school but came home for the summer. Matthew brought his new wife, a fellow teacher named Anne, and Peter came with Sarah and 3 grandchildren now. The house was full of noise and laughter. Multiple generations gathered around the table. Faith had set that very first dinner she cooked for Parker all those years ago. Looking around at the faces of her children and grandchildren, Faith felt overwhelmed by the richness of the life she had built from such desperate beginnings. After dinner, when the younger grandchildren were asleep and the adults sat on the expanded porch talking and laughing, Clara raised her glass in a toast. "To my parents," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "who taught us that strength comes in many forms, that love is a choice you make every day, and that the hardest paths can lead to the most beautiful destinations. Thank you for showing us what a true partnership looks like." Parker and Faith raised their own glasses, their eyes meeting across the space between them, with understanding built over nearly 3 decades of shared life. The years grew gentler as Faith and Parker aged. They gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to Peter and Sarah, though Parker could never quite stop working entirely. He still rode out to check fence lines, still had opinions on herd management, still built and repaired with his own hands. Faith continued her garden, though it was smaller now, more manageable. She spent time with her grandchildren, teaching them the same lessons her mother had taught her. She baked and preserved, quilted and mended, and sat on the porch in the evenings with Parker, still finding new things to talk about after all these years. In the spring of 1910, Faith and Parker marked 32 years of marriage. They took a quiet day together, riding out to the creek that had been their special place since the beginning. The cottonwoods were larger now, the willows fuller, but the water still ran clear and cold over the same smooth stones. "You remember what I asked you here?" Parker said, settling on the creek bank beside Faith. About whether you thought you could be happy on the ranch. I remember, Faith said, lacing her fingers through his. I told you I thought I could be. I was wrong about that. Parker looked concerned until Faith smiled. I was wrong because what I have felt here has gone so far beyond happiness. Contentment, fulfillment, joy, love in all its forms. This place, this life with you, it has been everything I did not know to dream of when I was a lost young woman with nowhere to go. You were never lost, Parker said firmly. You were temporarily without direction, but you always had purpose and strength. I just gave you a space where those qualities could flourish. We gave each other that space, Faith corrected. You needed me as much as I needed you, Parker. We saved each other. They sat by the creek until the sun began to set, then rode slowly back to the ranch, their ranch, the home they had built together from hope and hard work. The grandchildren grew, new ones were born. Peter and Sarah had 5 children eventually, a house full of energy and joy. Matthew and Anne had 3 quiet, studious children who loved books like their father. Clara remained unmarried but adopted a daughter, scandalizing some but creating her own version of family. Grace married a fellow veterinarian and had twin boys who kept her exhausted and delighted. Faith and Parker watched their family grow and spread, seeing their values and lessons pass to a new generation. They saw their grandchildren grow into good people who worked hard, treated others with respect, and understood that strength and gentleness were not opposites but companions. In the summer of 1920, Faith turned 68 and Parker 71. The ranch was thriving under Peter's management. The house was full of 3 generations for a family reunion, and Faith felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. One evening during the reunion, the youngest grandchild, a curious 10-year-old named Samuel, climbed into Faith's lap and asked the question she had been expecting for years. "Grandma, how did you and Grandpa meet?" The porch went quiet, all the adults and older children listening. Faith looked at Parker, who nodded encouragingly. "Well," Faith began, "it was a very long time ago in 1878, and I was in a difficult situation. I had lost my parents and my home, and I was working at a job that was not good for me. One night, things came to a head and I had to leave very suddenly. I was frightened and alone with nowhere to go and very little money." Samuel's eyes were wide. "What did you do?" "I walked," Faith said simply. "I walked until I did not know where I was going anymore, and that is when I met your grandfather." "I was in town getting supplies," Parker picked up the story. "And I saw this brave young woman who looked like her world had just fallen apart but who was still moving forward. So I did the only thing I could think of. I offered her a job." "You gave her a job?" Samuel seemed disappointed. "That is not very romantic," Faith laughed. "Oh, but it was, sweetheart. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for me. Your grandfather offered me respect when I had been shown none. He offered me safety when I had been in danger. He offered me a future when I thought I had none. He offered me a clean start in his name, and I took both." "And then you fell in love," Samuel prompted. "And then we fell in love," Parker confirmed. "Not right away, but gradually as we worked together and got to know each other. We fell in love the best way, by becoming friends first, by learning to respect and trust each other." Faith looked around at her children and grandchildren, at the life she and Parker had built. "The most important thing I want you all to know is that love is not just feelings. Love is choice and action. It is choosing every day to be kind, to work together, to support each other. Your grandfather and I have had hard times along with the good, but we chose each other every single day for 42 years. And I would choose you all over again," Parker said, reaching for Faith's hand. "Every day, every challenge, every joy, I would choose you." Faith felt tears on her cheeks, but she was smiling. and I would choose you." The family sat together as the sun set. Multiple generations bound by love and shared history, all of it stemming from one act of kindness on a dark night in Reno so many years ago. As the years advanced, Faith and Parker slowed but never stopped. They walked instead of rode, supervised instead of working directly, but they remained engaged with the ranch and the family. They sat on the porch most evenings, watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved for over 4 decades. In the fall of 1925, Parker's health began to fail. He had always been strong as an ox, but at 78, even the strongest bodies wear down. A cough that would not leave developed into pneumonia, and despite Clara's best medical care, Parker weakened steadily. Faith barely left his side, holding his hand, talking to him about their years together, reminding him of all the joy they had shared. The family gathered, children and grandchildren filling the house with quiet presence. On a clear October evening, with Faith beside him and his family nearby, Parker Anderson drew his last breath. His final words were, "I love you, Faith. Thank you for everything." Faith held him as he passed, her tears falling on his still face. The pain of losing him was staggering, a physical ache that threatened to drown her. But even in her grief, she felt gratitude. Gratitude for every year, every day, every moment they had shared. They buried Parker on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple stone marking his grave. The funeral was attended by hundreds, a testament to the respect and love the community held for him. Faith stood strong through it all, supported by her children, but finding her own strength in the knowledge that she had loved Parker Anderson with everything she had, and he had loved her the same way. The months after Parker's death were the hardest of Faith's life. The house felt empty without him, the evenings on the porch lonely, the bed cold. But she was surrounded by family who loved her, and gradually the sharp edge of grief dulled into a softer ache of missing him. Faith lived another 7 years after Parker's death, staying in the ranch house surrounded by family. She watched more grandchildren grow up, met great-grandchildren, and continued to share the story of how she and Parker had met whenever anyone asked. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, offering advice on the ranch operations, tending a small garden, quilting blankets for new babies. She spoke often of Parker, keeping his memory alive through stories that made the younger generations understand the depth of love their grandparents had shared. On a spring morning in 1932, Faith Anderson passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 80. She was buried beside Parker on the hill, their stones side by side, united in death as they had been in life. The ranch continued to prosper under the family's care, passing from generation to generation. The house Faith and Parker had built and expanded stood strong, sheltering new generations. The garden flourished, the cattle grazed, the creek ran clear, and the land held the memory of 2 people who had loved it and each other with everything they had. Years later, when the great-grandchildren asked about Faith and Parker, they were told a story of love born from kindness, of second chances taken and honored, of 2 people who had built something beautiful from the broken pieces of their lives. They were told how Faith had left a saloon with nothing but shame, how Parker had offered her a clean start and his name, and how together they had created a legacy of love and family that would endure for generations. It was a story of the Wild West, of hard work and harder times, of survival and triumph. But most of all, it was a love story, a testament to the power of compassion, the possibility of redemption, and the enduring truth that sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest futures. Faith and Parker Anderson had proven that love could grow anywhere, even from the most desperate beginnings. They had shown that kindness had power, that respect built foundations stronger than any stone, and that a life built on mutual support and genuine care could weather any storm. Their legacy lived on in the ranch they had built, the family they had raised, and the story they had created together. A story that began with shame and fear but ended with love and joy, with generations of family gathered on the land they had made their own. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the hills and the breeze whispered through the cottonwoods by the creek, those who knew the story could almost see them there. Faith and Parker, sitting on their porch, hands intertwined, watching the day end in peace and contentment, together as they had always been meant to be. Their love story, born in the spring of 1878 in Reno, Nevada, had proven that even in the harsh reality of the Wild West, even when all seemed lost, love could find a way. It could heal wounds, build dreams, and create something lasting and true. Faith Garrett had left the Silver Dollar Saloon with nothing but shame. Parker Anderson had offered her a clean start and his name. Together, they had built a love that transcended time, a family that would carry their legacy forward, and a story that would be told and retold as an example of what love, in its truest form, could accomplish. It was a story of the American West, but more than that, it was a story of the human heart, of its capacity for resilience, for hope, for love that transforms and endures. It was, in the end, a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating. And so it lived on, passed from generation to generation, a reminder that sometimes the best love stories begin not with grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but with one person seeing another's worth when they cannot see it themselves, and offering them the most precious gift of all, a chance to begin again. Faith and Parker Anderson had taken that chance and made it into something extraordinary. Their happily ever after was not a fairy tale ending but a real, earned, hard-won triumph of love over circumstance, of hope over despair, of two souls finding each other and choosing every day to build something beautiful together. In the end, that was their legacy. Not just the ranch or the family, but the proof that love, real love, could conquer anything. That kindness mattered. That second chances were possible. That a woman leaving a saloon in shame and a cowboy offering his name could create a story worth remembering for all time. Their story was complete, their love eternal, their legacy secure. And in the hearts of all who knew them and all who would hear their story in years to come, Faith and Parker Anderson lived on, forever young, forever in love, forever together on their ranch in the Nevada hills, watching the sunset and holding hands, just as they had for 47 beautiful years.